understand what you were saying.
No, there were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day, it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit.
Police are nowhere to be found.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did.
You see that guy getting hit with a tiki torch? That's me. You're probably wondering how I got in this situation. Well, the truth here is, I oppose anti-Semitism. I oppose all forms of bigotry, and that's what put me in harm's way on August 11th, 2017. Those who are familiar with my work know that I also follow around state politics. Last year I wrote an article on my newsletter about Glenn Youngkin, about his attempts to tackle anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, nothing I outlaid in that article happened. While this was going on, Donald Trump had met with Kanye West and Nick Fuentes in Mar-a-Lago. This is something most Republicans couldn't even bother to condemn. At the same time, Glenn Youngkin held his own commission on anti-Semitism, which just affirmed a belief in Zionism in place of combating anti-Semitism.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Palestine will be free!
The chants, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, have been extremely controversial in that many people believe that it is anti-Semitic to call that. I disagree. I don't think it's necessarily an anti-Semitic statement that in different instances it could be, but you need to look at the context. When you look at the context of Israel killing thousands of civilians in Palestine, then you would say that it is not an anti-Semitic statement. When you use it in the context of immediately in the aftermath of the hundreds of Israelis that were killed by Hamas, you would make a much more compelling, that would be an anti-Semitic statement. But these protests aren't in support of Hamas, no matter what people would tell you. These are protests denouncing all of the deaths from the Israeli military in Gaza. These protests against the war in Gaza, against this killing of civilians by the Israeli military, had been compared to Unite the Right Tiki Torch marches. And I can just say, as an individual who's been at these protests and has experienced these violence, they're not the same. One thing at these protests here in Richmond is these protests include Jewish voices, and not just Jewish voices that double whatever Muslims, Arabs say, but want to include a community of both Jewish and Muslim people.
Does President Biden think the anti-Israel protesters in this country are extremists?
What I can say is what we've been very clear about this. When it comes to anti-Semitism, there's no place. We have to make sure that we speak against it very loud, and be very clear about that. Remember, what the president decided when the president decided to run for president is what he saw in Charlottesville in 2017, when he saw neo-Nazis marching down the streets of Charlottesville with vile anti-Semitic just hatred. And he was very clear then, and he's very clear now. He's taken actions against this over the past 2 years, and he's continued to be clear. There is no place for this type of vile and despite this kind of rhetoric.
What's really a classic example right here is a tweet here from Christopher Rufo, where he says conservatives need to create a strong association between Hamas, BLM, DSA, and academic decolonization in the public mind. Connect the dots, then attack, delegitimize, and discredit. Make the center-left disavow them. Make them political untouchables. This is the strategy that conservatives are going to have in turning the anti-war movement into something, quite literally, as he said it, untouchable.
But enough about the White House. This is about Virginia. This is about Glenn Youngkin and Jason Miyares. Glenn Youngkin put out a directive, an executive directive that would include more money into grants for law enforcement, more money that would go towards surveillance of Arab and Muslim Americans, money that would go in patrolling anti-war activists. When Youngkin had his executive direction to combat anti-Semitism through protests in Virginia, he specifically cited protests in Richmond that had been using the phrases "from the river to the sea." This is the connection. When Democrats, even in the White House, are condemning from the river to the sea, that those types of protests, they're giving way for law enforcement to have unfair scrutiny of anti-war protests. At the same time, Jason Miyares is having investigations into Muslim activists, into groups such as American Muslims for Palestine. Earlier this year, Jason Miyares denounced a leaked classified document from the FBI that labeled radical traditional Catholics as possible subjects to watch. In that same document included individuals like Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes, if you're not aware of him, is a Holocaust-denying white nationalist who's using traditional Catholicism to recruit members into his movement. By condemning this FBI document, Jason Miyares, not openly, but sort of an indirect way, endorsed anti-Semitic white nationalists. I want to end on a very positive note. I want to say that there has been a successful mass movement that is growing in steam every day to oppose just the violence that the Israeli government has been enacting on civilians in Gaza. I want to say that there has been a restored anti-war movement that is calling out war crimes committed by the Israel government. But in Virginia, there's been a pushback against, this weird, just not caring about what happened in Charlottesville in 2017. That includes charges against people that used an open flame for intimidation at the UVA campus.
This is Chris Cantwell. He's one of the people convicted of assaulting me. He's still an anti-Semite.
I didn't say capable. Of course we're capable. I'm carrying a pistol. I go to the gym all the time. I'm trying to make myself more capable of violence. I'm here to spread ideas, talk, in the hopes that somebody more capable will come along and do that. Somebody like Donald Trump who does not give his daughter to a Jew.
I wanted to include him to demonstrate that combating anti-Semitism isn't just locking people up. I also want to point out that people like Christopher Cantwell are using the conflict in Gaza to further their white nationalism, to equate violence and war with all Jewish people. This is something that couldn't be further from the truth and something that needs to be denounced immediately.
The prosecutor in Albemarle County that decided not to press charges is a man by the name of Robert Tracy. Robert Tracy lost his re-election in 2018, and Jim Hinkle took over those cases and began prosecuting earlier this year. I don't think sending people to prison will stop them from being anti-Semitic. That's why I'm actually really glad that Jim Hinkle is finding ways for people to plead guilty and avoid going to prison. And I want to say that there have been people involved at the Unite the Right that maybe directly or indirectly caused harm to me and sort of have apologized, have turned their lives around. And I'm really thankful for that. I want to thank the people that have been involved with groups like Life After Hate. I'm going to include a link to Life After Hate. Maybe somebody who's been involved in Unite the Right, who've been involved in these white nationalist movements, want to turn their life around. And I really want to accept a good-hearted apology and somebody trying to turn themselves around. At the same time, I've seen people who've grown up in traditional Muslim households that have changed their way of thinking. That maybe they've even grown up in a household that believe that all Jewish people are coming after them. And when they've met anti-war Jewish people who've protested alongside with them, have changed their minds. And so, to all of this, I want people to remember that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are two completely different planes that very rarely intersect, and to tie the anti-war movement with these violent white nationalists is a huge disservice in trying to end anti-Semitism.
I want to thank all the people that subscribe to my Patreon. It's not really big right now. It's going to be a short list scrolling through there. But I'm going to continue to follow politics in Virginia. I'm going to continue to follow the radical right-wing people in Virginia, follow protests, follow state government meetings. I think it's very important to follow these types of things and to have a non-corporate, non-bullshit message about all of this. So thanks for subscribing. And thanks for watching.